Welcome to another episode of the Emulsion Podcast, a show for chefs who want to think better, increase their performance, and believe that it's possible to take lessons from what others have learned. I am your host, Justin Khanna, and I'd love to continue the conversation with you from this episode on my online Circle community. There you can share your 2 cents and learn about supporting the show on justinkhanna.com/support. For your convenience, it's also linked up in the description of your podcast player. Let's get into the show. What's up, folks? Welcome back to the Emulsion Podcast. My guests today, yes, I said guests with an additional S, are Anders Husa and Kaitlin Orr. They are both taste hunters for the world's 50 best list and food and travel bloggers in their own right. And they also host food tours in the, non-pandemic times. I personally met Anders back when he was at a guest chef collaboration dinner in Norway that I was fortunate enough to cook for back when I was working at Lysverket. It was in Oslo in 2015, believe it or not, years and years ago. And Kaitlin is an American writer, photographer, all-around food lover and sharer who has since made the move overseas. And they both live in Copenhagen now, creating all kinds of content around their travels, their eatings. And they also host a community on Patreon, if any of this sounds fun to you. And you should check that out. It's called The Hungries is the name of their community. If you enjoy this interview, I also recommend you queue up my conversation with Max Shapiro, where him and I also dig into a lot of, kind of experiences from these fantastic restaurants all around the world. If at any point you would like to pause this interview and check out Kaitlin or Anders online or any of the specific linkable things that we discuss, please do check out the show notes in the description or online at justinkhanna.com/media. Thanks so much for being with me. Let's get into the show. I thought a fun place to start might be the correction that you provided me, Anders, which was the kind of like delineation between being able to contribute to the world's 50 best list and then what you shared that you guys do, which is the taste hunter positions. And
Yes.
so can you tell people a little bit about that position and like maybe how you guys came into that and the function that it serves towards the greater project that is the San Pellegrino list?
So the idea with the Taste Hunter program is for the 50 best organization to have kind of like, I don't know, scouts around the world that
feet
are
on the ground in countries all over the world, like
So-
locals.
Exactly. So they try to have a representative being a taste hunter in all the major parts of the world. I know they're struggling to fill the position somewhere, but So Kaitlin
There's like one per region, and you wouldn't normally have more than one per region. Like now there's 2 of us in Scandinavia, but that's because of this. So
You're both based there, yeah.
Yeah, I started being the West Coast of the U.S. Taste hunter. So that was when I was living in Los Angeles and mostly sharing from L.A. and San Francisco restaurants. And of course, whenever you're traveling, you're also sharing from wherever you're eating, and taste hunters are people who tend to travel to eat. But yeah, what were you gonna say? Something?
Well, just that Kaitlin was the first taste hunter among the 2 of us, and she was a taste hunter based in the US when I met her. But then we started traveling together, and it just became natural for me to join the program as well after a while. And I was based in Scandinavia, and they were actually looking for someone to fill that region. But yeah, now we made it difficult for them with Kaitlin moving here, so now they're missing someone on the West
Normally
Coast.
we would be in the US a lot more, but this year it has been difficult.
Yeah,
so.
actually, in not last year, but the year before last year, everything was working out fine. We were splitting our time between the US and here, but we have not been able to do that.
Because Kaitlin, your family is still in LA, right?
My family is in LA, and we were hoping to be there for the winter months and get some sunshine, but it will be the first place we go once this is over.
That was grand.
Well, what a feeling when Scandinavia comes out of winter, right? Like you guys are. I mean, believe it or not, Seattle is a sister city of Bergen. Anders, I don't know if you knew that, but that's part of what.
Yeah.
It's part of what influenced my move here, and we're going through the sun is shining brilliantly right now, which is, I loved Bergen, so I love the rain, and so it's not actually like this thing where I go into seasonal depression, but it is pretty cool when Scandinavia comes out of the winter.
It feels like life is returning. It's like I almost have forgotten that I've been virtually hibernating for months. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what sun feels like.
I lived in Bergen for 4 years, and I think I got a sense of that depression of living in Bergen but it's also related to the fact that I was a poor student back then, and I was living kind of outside the city, and everything was just crap.
Sure.
So I needed to do something different. I didn't like when I go back to Bergen now. It's a beautiful city.
Exactly. I mean, so I lived in Chicago. I was on the opening team of Grace, Curtis Duffy's place, and I was, I think, 19 when I moved there, 19 or 20. So I couldn't drink alcohol yet, and I had no friends, and I lived within like 6 blocks of the restaurant so that I could walk to work. I didn't have a car, and I moved there in October. So it was like as the restaurant opened, we went into winter in Chicago. And I kept telling myself, I have seasonal depression. I'm like so miserable at this thing. And then I moved to Bergen, where it was like 200 days of rain a year, super dark in the winter times. But I had friends. I loved working at the restaurant, and I just like would go out all the time and go on hikes and do all this stuff. And I was like, oh, it's not this depression part. Like, it's not the seasons that's making me sad. It's like the stuff to do and like how I spend my time that's making me sad. It was very like huge learning experience. Back to World's 50 Best. When you guys make these decisions or kind of like see something bubbling up or you hear about something, where does that information go? Does it go to San Pellegrino, the organization? Do you guys email individual people who are, like going to these meals and actually voting? Like get into the practicalities of that role, or kind of like how you guys view that position.
It's not fully as organized as that. There's really no system. We're basically just doing our thing. We're exploring our region and finding amazing restaurants and places to eat here, and doing our thing. But then a couple of times a year, either the 50 Best organization will ask us, or we can also chip in ideas for these takeovers where we
Instagram takeovers.
Yeah. So we contribute photos and videos and some text for them to post on their channels.
So like this summer, we were highlighting what some of the restaurants here were doing in response to the pandemic, the Noma burger, all these kinds of things. Like, we're here, we want to showcase what our region is doing. And in normal times, in non-pandemic times, as taste hunters, this is something we're not hiding. So of course, there's probably voters, 50 Best voters following us and seeing, where are they going to eat, even when we're not doing takeovers on 50 Best's account. But the voters are always anonymous, so we have no idea who they are. They could be taking some of our recommendations just like anyone else, but we don't know who they are. They change every year, the voters, and that's about, we're pretty much just ambassadors more for our region's restaurants than we are for the 50 Best brand.
What do people get wrong about World's 50 Best? Because from the way that you're describing it, it's like if we all kind of like put our heads together and decided that this was going to be how we're going to structure this kind of like global, we don't necessarily have to call it ranking, but kind of like opinionated discussion of how restaurants stack up against each other and who's kind of like performing at a really high level. I think we would come up with something pretty similar to kind of like what you're describing, where it's like there's people who are kind of like the vanguards, are they're on the front lines. They kind of like hop around. They're locally based. They have connections in the community. But then there's this other side of it where people like completely bash World's 50 Best from both sides, right? So like Momofuku Noodle Bar shouldn't be as high as it is, but then at the same time, you're not highlighting enough smaller restaurants and casual places. So it's like, feels like you can't win at a certain point with these lists and stuff like that. So what do people get wrong, I guess, about World's 50 Best, knowing that you guys like not just work with them, but like you're in it, you know what I mean? Like you get the ins and outs of the whole ranking systems in that.
I think first and foremost, people just take it a little bit too seriously. Like they think that, this is the answer. This is the list that,
These are the only restaurants I should ever eat at. No, it's like, we view it as like a starting point for our trips when we're planning. And also like, it's not so much for us, at least, maybe for the restaurants, it matters more. I'm not sure, but for us, it's less about the ranking on the list. But if you're on this list, then you're an amazing restaurant. Who cares if you're number 47 or if you're number 5? I mean, I don't think there's a huge difference there. It's like you're already at this amazing level, and they're spread out all over the world. And okay, if I'm in Chile, I'm going to go there because it sounds amazing, because I've heard about it. And I think it's less about the ranking for us. And it changes every year because the voters change every year. And why are some of the same restaurants on it repeatedly? It's because with anything that becomes popular, noma, you hear about it over and over, and people want to keep going, and everybody's going, and you have a great experience, and it's a snowball, right? So I think it's hard to make it onto the list if you're a new restaurant, because you have to get people in your doors. You have to have diners. You have to have the voters there to vote for you. But then once you're on it, if you keep it up, I think you can stay on it for quite a long time.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of the critique that 50 Best has got over the years, they are now addressing as well. Like these restaurants that have never been on the list, they're now making different categories for them. You have the 50 Best Discoveries, and now you have the Essence of Asia list for the street food. So, I can only imagine. I mean, we're not involved with the management there in any way or form, but I can only imagine them getting a lot of criticism. Yeah. I mean, they have the praise, they're respected. They have a lot of followers. They have a lot of people who care about them, but they also definitely get a lot of criticism. And I can only imagine them trying to navigate through that. And, they have to decide, are we going to be the new Michelin Guide, covering everything, which the Michelin Guide doesn't really do, but they, cover more than just 100 restaurants in the world. But, or are we going to be, we are, the 50 best list.
And I think it's kind of nice that they're not like Michelin in the sense that they don't have to have a guide for a city to have a restaurant on the list there. They can touch places that are more outside of your capital cities and your popular destinations.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That's probably where they kind of found their market, is that they could talk about restaurants all over the world, regardless of whether they had a guide covering that region.
There's an interesting joke that goes around in relation to, I grew up with a cable TV in my house, and when everything kind of moved to Netflix, and now you have Hulu, and now you have Disney Plus, there's this joke that went around that was like, oh, everybody got away from cable, but now there's all these streaming companies, and what if we just bundled all of these streaming companies together? And it's just kind of like it goes back the other way. And I think the very same thing would happen if, to all these people that say something to the effect of we should just burn 50 Best down, we should start over, we should build something new. At a certain point, I have a feeling it would get back to something that looks very similar to what World's 50 Best is doing. And so it's always I try to caution people against that. But something that I have been thinking through, as someone who speaks to people who are either going for these accolades or, I've worked at places that get these, awards and recognition. Is there, and I'm curious to kick the ball around with this idea with you guys, from the sense of, is there a world where we can just be real and say that there's an objective look at restaurants and a subjective look at restaurants? So objective, what I'm saying in that context, is when you look at a restaurant on Google Maps, and you have what shows up on my phone, at least here in Seattle, is these tick boxes of offers takeout, has parking, ADA compliant, more information that is objective to that place, has 65 seats, past data of is usually busy right now, these very objective things about a restaurant. And COVID showed us that this information is helpful because you need to know if a restaurant is offering dine-in right now, or if they have, so that provides a lot of utility. And then on the subjective side of things, we actually call it what it is. It's people's opinions on their experiences at these places. And you actually empower people to positively incentivize them in a way that I don't think a platform like Yelp or TripAdvisor does. They end up pooling all the gravity around people's bad experiences versus this other thing that's Foursquare has kind of tried it, and Google obviously has their reviews and all that sorts of stuff. But we actually lean into the subjective part of when I went there, and that's what I try to put my going out to eat videos about, is when I went to go here, here's what my experience was. And so hopefully that cohesive blend of you have the objective parts about the restaurant and then a bunch of stories of people's experiences, good and bad, that would quell a lot of this stuff. Am I am I on to something, or is that like something that you guys think about, or am I missing something there?
If you're talking about like, I mean, like, you know, you're talking about the videos you make, and, you know, of course we use Google Maps as well when it comes to like the nitty gritty of trip planning. But I think like, I mean, when we get down to deciding where to go eat, and I don't know, I can't speak for everyone and how they decide to go eat somewhere, but like, I think it has to come, of course, I think the subjective part, the opinions come into play, but it has to come from someone you trust, whether that's a guide of some kind or whether it's a friend who you really trust and have the same taste as. But, you know, if you're going to trust someone's opinion, then you have to trust their opinions generally to be able to take their opinion, like, at least, and go to a specific restaurant. That's how I see it. But
subjective experiences always win, though, right? If you have one bad experience, you feel like overlooked or neglected as a guest one time, and you might never return. It's funny because we've had some bad experiences with places, and then for some reason decided to go back anyway. I mean, of course, we try to give people a second chance, but if you have a really bad experience, why would you really go back? But then we've gone back and discovered that it's actually a great place. We just had we just hit them on a really bad night. Yeah,
it can happen, I think, to anyone.
Can you talk a little bit about, like, you and I, like the three of us can articulate what makes a bad experience at a restaurant, but I think for people who are either just starting off cooking, or, you know, like I tell the story of, we had a sous chef at Lysverket that he was like a sous chef at La Serre in Paris, and he came to work at the restaurant in Bergen, and it was maybe like 3 years into being a sous chef in Bergen, he was like, I'm going to go back to Paris and I'm going to have my first Michelin meal. And I was like, dude, you grew up in France and you worked in Paris for something crazy like 8 years, and you've never gone and ate at a Michelin-starred restaurant before. And so it's like, there's a lot of people who come into the industry and they start cooking, but they haven't actually been on the guest side of things. So when you're talking about bad experiences, and you don't have to call anybody out, but I guess what makes a bad experience, or what would completely turn something sour for you guys?
I think most of the restaurants that we go to, like, we have tried to research enough, like, about the food that we're pretty sure that the food is going to be pretty good, and that, of course, you can have misses there as well. But I think something that really stands out to me that is maybe more easily fixed is just hospitality. And it's just such an important part of dining out, because that is what will keep you coming back to a restaurant, is the host and how they make you feel. And like that is what I'm craving right now during lockdown, is I miss the people behind these restaurants. Like, of course I miss the dishes, but you can kind of try to recreate some of the dishes at home, or you can still have good food, but it's the people, it's like the soul of the place. And so if you're not getting that somewhere, if you have someone with a snotty attitude, and that's just like, why would you go somewhere if that just makes you feel bad? Luckily, I feel like that is rare, because at least at these pretty high level restaurants, or restaurants that care about their food also care about their service. They usually go hand in hand.
It's like more 50% or more than 50, right? Like, how you treat the guest is like just
exactly.
as, yeah.
And again, like, for me, like, it's less about the ambiance and it's less about the vibe. Like, that is part of it. But like, I could be eating like on the street, on the side of a street. If like someone is nice and the food is good, like, I will come back and sit on the street again.
Yeah. Just being greeted by someone with a smile and have an interaction with someone makes all the difference, you know. Just sitting around, I mean, you can have a restaurant that's busy and you have to wait a long time for the food, but the host can make up for that if they just, you know, interact with you and make you feel welcome.
Yeah. And like menus can change. So even if you love a restaurant, if you go back and, okay, you know, this dish was better than another dish, like, that's, you know, menus are going up and down, changing with the season, changing with time. But I think it's the thing that would make me really like have a bad experience would probably be something more personal than that. Or the food would have to be really bad to get me to not go back.
Well, I'm also hearing you guys say that there's this, you know, common, like pulling back the curtain from restaurant life a little bit. Like there can be moments where, so like for example, I had a meal last month at a 3 Michelin-star restaurant where the front of house team came out and put out cutlery for a specific dish. Like I knew exactly what dish was coming, but it was very there was a mistake. We were not getting that dish, and so the front of house person had to come back and like remove that cutlery. There was a amazingly eloquent way of like making jokes at the table when they removed that cutlery, and it's like I had worked at this restaurant, so I knew exactly what dish was coming, and so it's like I had a little bit of what I'm trying to get at is a lot of times restaurant people, chefs that go out into the dining room specifically, feel like when something goes wrong, it's like you should be a turtle and go in your shell and just like not talk about it. But I think what you guys are saying, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, is it's almost like lean into it and almost kind of like talk to the guests about it from the sense like don't try to hide it, because we know, like we know something's going wrong. Or it's like if we're waiting for 20 minutes on a dish, like there's ways, there's more hospitality focused solutions to these problems versus thinking that like silence is the answer. Be curious to hear your thoughts there.
I totally agree. I mean, this way of being afraid of doing small errors like that it belongs to the past, in my opinion. It's like the formal restaurant where you can't do a single little mistake. You like the whole myth about how the Michelin inspectors are waiting for a dropped fork, exactly, or dropping the fork to see how quickly someone picks it up, or waiting to see if the hospitality staff makes a mistake. It belongs to the past.
No, it's we've been in the exact same situation as you. I can picture cutlery coming down, and I can picture the waiter coming out and laughing and being like, "Oops, that one's not coming yet," and taking this away. It'll come back. You'll see this fork again. And it's like, oh, cool, no worries, like whatever. Yeah,
totally. And also just, okay, this is a 3 Michelin-star restaurant you're talking about, so you can kind of understand why they're doing it this way. But you see even in the Michelin world and in the 50 Best world that restaurants will go more and more away from this very formal thing with cutlery. They might just have the cutlery on the table for you to even you even avoid those kind of issues. It matters so little. Like that's never what makes or breaks a meal for us.
Yeah.
Who cares, Who
cares about the spoon?
Let's talk about when you guys are going to a city that you haven't been, and you can switch city with, country or, neighborhood. When you're thinking about strategizing there, and in, doing my homework on you two, I heard you guys talk about FOMO in this process. So kind of like, how do you strategize around doing a new city?
Well, first of all, the FOMO is something we are learning to try to let go of, because you're never going to get to go to every restaurant you want to visit in one trip unless you stay there for like months at a time. It's just like your list just keeps growing. You stay there and you meet locals and you just keep adding spots to your trip.
We do fantasize about going like a month to Paris and apartment swapping with someone just so we can stay there for a long time.
Yeah.
Because you want to have enough time, but most of the time we're going to a place for a week or less. Mm-hmm. And we have to figure out a way to prioritize our time around that.
Right. So then, I think the research starts a lot longer back than the trip planning. It starts with just following people on Instagram, from chefs to food writers to other food bloggers to people who love to eat out. And it's constantly saving restaurants to little folders or on Google Maps or something. Like you probably do the same. You have a long list of places. Like once you book that flight, you already have 50 restaurants you want to go to. Okay. And then it's narrowing it down and it's saying, okay, maybe let's pick 2 fine dining meals. Maybe we like to have a spread. We don't want to be eating tasting menus every day. We want to have the casual spots and we want to have the bakeries. We want to have the coffee shops, the wine bars, and maybe a couple more fine dining meals. So, okay, which fine dining meals are we going to prioritize? Can we get reservations, book those first, lock them in, then fill in the gaps with the other stuff, and then also leaving time. We've learned to leave a couple days just completely unplanned, because what if something goes wrong, or you have to move something, and also like best case scenario, nothing goes wrong, and then you have a day to go to a local recommendation that you got from your som at a restaurant who said, you have to go to this new place around the corner. You can't miss it. It's the best place in town right now. You have to go. Then you have a time slot for that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's usually how we plan a trip. And
about the FOMO, like we've had FOMO many times. We want to make sure we get to this restaurant. We've been dreaming about going to that restaurant, but we've just learned that we shouldn't try to fit everything in if we can. We never do back-to-back tasting menus, for example. We've done it a couple of times,
painful.
And it's just painful, and it's not fair to the restaurant. It's not fair to yourself.
You want to be hungry for every meal, and you want to be able to fully appreciate it and just come into it with an open mind. It's like, I don't know, I wouldn't see 2 back-to-back like operas. I wouldn't see 2 back-to-back Broadway shows. And for me, it's like the same thing. You don't want to exhaust yourself.
Yeah.
I'd argue it's worse than that, right? Because the chefs that are doing these tasting menus design the experience to, arguably overstimulate all 5 of your senses. Mm-hmm. And to have that happen, like, it seems so silly to call it exhausting, because it's like you're being pampered if effectively. Yeah. And so to call being pampered exhausting is a little, it feels like an oxymoron. Yeah. But it truly is. Like the point of these meals is to like completely give you the, like peak experience. Like chefs research psychological stimulating things to do with like colors and over acidified foods, and like everything is salted like crazy. And so I don't know, like, do you, and so people often misconstrue that with like, oh, well, it's so easy to just sit there and eat. Like, what are you doing? But it's like, it's not, it's something completely different. I'm glad you brought up like stage performances, Kaitlin, because that's like the same principles apply there.
It's like culinary art. And I think that's also something that I really try to explain to people when they're comparing the price, the price of a meal. And that's something that I'm like, well, how much would you pay to go see a Broadway show? This is like, it's that level of, maybe this is a once in a lifetime meal or a once in a lifetime experience. And I think you need to look at it from that lens instead of just like, if you just want a meal, yeah, sure, go grab a taco off the street. And you should do that too, but they're different things.
It's so funny because the number one comment we get on our YouTube videos is always like, there's too little food. Where's the food? I don't see, like, do they only serve air and flowers here? And it's like,
small portion.
I just wish I could pick these people up and put them and experience it right there and then, and they just realize how much food you get at these restaurants. Even though each individual serving looks small, at the end of the meal, you're so full and you've had like so much to eat and drink for so many hours that you are exhausted in many ways.
The benefit I have of the chef audience that I have is it's almost like a built-in moderation thing for my comment section, because I have people that, especially on the ones that like go viral, like I had my one in Austria, Frantzen, like got quite a bit of traction, and same comments come through when you like reach that, audience group that's just like going around trying to troll restaurant videos on the internet. And, I have chefs that chime in that say like, it's actually quite a bit of food. Like this is actually like a hugely expansive tasting menu. But it's just, it is kind of comical to see those comments of like, I could have gone to McDonald's and gotten X number of burgers for what you paid. Cause I post my checks at the end of my videos as well. And so it's just funny. And I kind of open the door from that sense, like showing people what I paid. But anyways, the interesting piece that you guys have done in the past, and I don't know if this is something that's going to come back when COVID's over, is taking those skills, because it's truly a skill. Like you and I can talk about planning a trip in this way, but as someone who's never done it before, it's just like, how do I even approach this? And you guys have, strategically, call it solved, but doing these like curated experiences, the food tours, because it's effectively getting all of that knowledge and all of the kind of like boots on the ground sense of a city and turning it into an experience where it's like you actually get the itinerary. And correct me if I'm saying any of this wrong, but can you talk a little bit about the curating experience? 'Cause I thought it was so smart what you like doing something like that.
Yeah, no. So we've done a little bit of food tours. It started out, for me, it started out before I met Kaitlin. I did a big food tour here in Copenhagen, but I wasn't living here back then. I was living in Oslo. So I just picked a time slot or a time period and planned out like a dream long weekend in Copenhagen, and then invited people to come along on this tour. And it was, I think we were like 15, 16 people, way too many. I learned a lot, but it was fun. And then shortly after we met, we did something similar in Singapore because we were there for the 50 Best Awards, and we thought it'd be a fun idea to do a food tour of Singapore, because I had been there many times because I have some friends who lives there. So we had done the research and knew where to take people.
I think that's the thing when when we've done all this research and like online, but also eating out as much as we do, we generally know like which places like are the best in town. That is our goal, at least. So when people come to us asking, for a food tour specifically, we can recommend things. So we started these food tours in Copenhagen last year when we were locked down here, because we're like, hey, we're here. If you're coming to town, mostly people in Denmark or Norway could come for a little bit, but if you're coming to town and you want someone to guide you to the best spots, we can be your guides. And we left it kind of open where if they wanted a custom tour, then they could just tell us their wishes. And some people knew like, okay, I want to be taken to the best pastry shop. I want to have a burger and I want to have, something else, XYZ. But it depends. It's very personal, I think, based on what people want. So if you want the best omakase menu, we've done all this research and we can guide you there. Or we can just, curate our own little short trip and show you a few highlights. If you just have a couple hours, then we can pick some of our favorites. But it's very open to what people want as well.
So, Anders, you sent me through a question about building food communities. So, you can take this as a leading question to talk a little bit about that if you'd like. But I've also seen it with, do you guys follow Iz Harris and what she's doing with Bright Trip? So she's also a YouTuber. She did a couple series on Eater here in the US. Eater, I think, chose her to be like the host of a couple of series that they did on Eater's channel. And her husband is Johnny Harris, who did the Vox series Borders, and they have 2 kids, so they travel around with their kids and they go out to restaurants and all over the place pre-COVID. But they launched this company called Bright Trip, which is doing something similar to what you're talking about, more from the sense of like being able to do the whole package with like where to stay and what to go sightsee and do all that sorts of stuff. So, obviously in the first few iterations of this, these people probably went to go out to eat with you guys. But as you're thinking about kind of like the curation element and being able to give someone a selective itinerary, potentially give them, capacity to get tables at places where they couldn't do it on their own. Like, how do you think through what you guys can provide value-wise versus like, this doesn't scale, like Anders, you're saying like the 16 people is way too many. And just like food communities in general. How are you guys thinking about that?
Well, we last year we launched this food tour concept first, and part of the idea was just what you said. Like some people just wanted to eat with us, so we're like, okay, well we can't just go around eating with people. So we need to make this into some kind of product. So we made food tours, but we took it one step further with Patreon, which we launched last year. And the whole idea of our Patreon was to create an online food community that would hopefully be interesting for our most, hardcore followers, people who have been following us for a long time. And it's been really surprising. We're so happy we did it. We now have a community of
150 people,
closing in on 150 people.
Amazing.
But yeah, it started as we thought people maybe wanted to connect on a deeper level with us, and we wanted to connect on a deeper level with our followers who, just message us all the time and ask us questions. I'm going here. Where should I go? It can be overwhelming on Instagram. So we wanted to have a forum for that, but it's become so much more than just asking us because it is a community. So they've also got this whole group of over 100 people to talk to and get recommendations from as well. So we'll go, we're constantly on the forum, but sometimes before we can even answer something, someone else has already jumped in and recommended something. And it's this beautiful thing where we're sharing and we're learning from our followers as well. And it's much bigger than we even thought it could be. So for, back to your question about like planning trips, we do have a certain level of membership because we have different tiers that you can join the club. You can just subscribe to the online chat room, or you can get some access to meetups and events with chefs, stuff like that. And then the highest tier, if you're a member of that tier, then you can get access to this travel concierge service is what we're calling it. So in that, if you're at that level of membership, then we once a year will plan a trip for you. And we're not promising any tables or anything like that. Of course, you can't guarantee that. But if you give us enough warning, if you know 6 months in advance that you're coming to Copenhagen, we can do our best and we can create what our perfect itinerary would be for them. Taking their wishes into consideration. It doesn't have to be Copenhagen. It could be anywhere. We'll do the research that we would do for ourselves. But in terms of scaling, of course, that can only be, we set it at once a year per person for a trip. Otherwise, if someone is interested in more than that, maybe we'll have to start a concierge service. But right now, because people are asking that, so we want to be able to help, but it's a lot of work, obviously.
It's tons of work. And like, kudos to you guys for structuring it in a way where, you put the limits on the things and you learn what works and what's like overwhelming, or, these people are asking too much. But, like, there's a sense when people ask for recommendations like that where it's like they just want the answer to the test, It's just like just tell me the answer. But there's an element of being able to, like you're talking about, Kaitlin, like being able to get a sense of what is it exactly how do you travel, like what are you looking to get out of, and that can only, we can hope that it can come from some sort of like chatbot thing in the future where people say like they input what they want, and then based on your guys' most frequently given answers, they can spit out a trip itinerary. I guess bigger goals for that, like obviously you spoke a little bit about like doing a full service concierge style service, but you guys are just two people, and when the the opinions, I guess, or the suggestions are coming from you two, like, I guess, how are you thinking about growing that? Of course, anybody who's interested, it's going to be linked up in the show notes if anybody wants to go check it out. But yeah, can you speak a little bit about goals for that project, or what you would consider a success with that project?
I don't think that necessarily the concierge service itself is the goal. That's more of like, at least right now, that's more of like a side part of it for people looking for that, or at least a way for us to be able to offer that to people looking to buy that from us. I think maybe our goal is, and who knows where it's still so new. We're just a few months into this food community, but right now it's been amazing to see how much it's growing in the first few months. I think we thought or hoped like, okay, maybe in the first year we can get 100 members. Like that was kind of our goal for ourselves. And, now we have 150 members in the first few months. And it's amazing to see, like, food is something that really connects people all over the world. And something I was talking to Anders about earlier today was that, like, we have this community of food friends around the world, from chefs to, social media friends, like through Instagram or in real life, however we've met. Like, we know the people to ask for recommendations and to meet up with for a meal when we go places. And that's like why I love this industry so much. But the people who are following us and have the same passions as us, they might not have these same connections, and I want to give them that community. I want them to have someone to reach out to in Seattle, not just for recommendations, but also, hey, do you want to meet me for a glass of wine? Or, I want locals. Like, I would love to have people, like, and it is all over the world already right now, but it's like maybe a couple people in each country for the most part. So we kind of have, like, our own regional people, but I would love to have like little groups, little sub communities of the Hungries, our community, everywhere, so that we have a little group in Tokyo and we could meet up with them when we go there and get the intel for the best restaurants right then, and just these local food groups, and then it's this bigger online food community as well, where we're always talking and sharing knowledge and sharing recipes and sharing, have you tried this wine bottle yet? Like, everything.
Exactly. Back to what you said about how, like, it's just the two of us, yes, But what we've learned from creating this food community is that it becomes not so much about us, actually. It becomes about the group, because everyone's chipping in and everyone's helping each other. And we're like, if we're not online for a couple of hours and someone has asked a question, you can bet that someone else has already answered it before we even log on.
We're more like moderating it at sometimes. Of course, we're contributing as well, but there's things where like there are experts. Like we have chefs and we have bartenders and we have bakers. So we have so many bakers that they specifically asked for a breadheads, is what we call it, breadheads chat, where they just talk about baking and sourdough all day long. And I don't know what they're talking about half the time, but if I ever want to start baking, I will go there and I will ask them. But they're helping each other. Like, is this underproofed? Is this overproofed? Here's my bake today. Look at the crumb. All of these, like, I'm like, wow, guys, you are nerding out. Like, go for it. It's amazing. It's awesome. Same with, we have, you know, a bartender who someone's like, oh, I have this, what cocktail should I make with it? And he's jumping in and giving recipe advice. And it's just, we can't even offer that. So that's, I think, what it's becoming.
Yeah.
That's great. As you guys were thinking about publishing your own work, Kaitlin, I know that you have kind of like call it a pseudonym, but it's like a play on your last name, right? As your account handle. But like thinking about showing your faces, doing your real names, like I can only assume you book your reservations under your real name, which when I was coming up, it was like the you know, kind of like 2012, 2013-ish was when it was like the pseudonymous kind of like or anonymous critic was kind of like starting to become a bit of a thing of the past. How do you guys think about that? Like just being so out there with your personalities, because it's like it's what you want to lend to that subjective piece. That's what we talked about earlier. But you know, there is this sense of like really sharing your thoughts and opening the door to be vulnerable from that sense. So I guess, how do you guys think about that? And I see it as a huge value prop. I'm so glad that I did everything under my own name, kind of like when I started publishing stuff. But I'd be curious if you guys grappled with that, or if you have suggestions for people who are kind of like, I don't know, like if I should do this under my own name, or if I should start a blog named something else.
It's a very interesting question. And the thing is, you know, you have to go back 10 years to when this kind of started for me. And back then, I didn't think about that decision. You know, it wasn't like, oh, should I be anonymous? Should I not be anonymous? It was just a personal Instagram profile where I started putting out, first of all, stuff I was cooking at home. And then later on, it turned into more about going out to eat. But I've always done it under my own name. And I guess you kind of have to, even though you have like a nickname.
Yeah, it's always
handle.
said my name on my profile anyway.
Yeah. And we've talked about this so many times, whether it's like, you know, there's pros and cons. Having your name out there. First of all, yes, you do open yourself up for criticism. People definitely know who you are, and it's very personal. Like if someone decides to attack you for some reason, it's very much you they attack and not an organization. But I wouldn't do it any other way. I think being anonymous is a little bit more a thing of a past, even though you can definitely like come with good arguments for why it makes sense as well. But I wouldn't have done anything different.
I think it's like for us, and I started the same as Anders, just, you know, it was a hobby. It wasn't planning to be more than that. But I think like from us, why we do what we do is just out of a place of passion for food. We just love food so much. And our goal is really just to highlight our best food experiences around the world, wherever we go, here or abroad. And it's just, then by putting our faces and our names out there, like whether you're watching a video of me eating something, like, you know, we're just trying to be real and bring you into the experience with us as if you're there, and like open it up to the world so you can see, like, you know, people reply to our stories even and are like, oh, you, like, I could tell from your reaction, like, that you didn't love that pastry as much as the one before or something. Like, you know, they can tell it's real. Like, it's just very, like, it's all out there in the open. But that's what we want it to be. Like, we want it to be honest. And of course, it's our opinions. It's not an overall opinion. This is our opinion. So if we say something is the best, or we recommend something, that's because we love it. And hopefully people who follow our recommendations have the same taste as us. But yeah, it is very personal. But I think it's kind of nice because then people start to get a sense for like what we do like, and then they start recommending places based on things that we have posted that we do like ourselves. So I'll get messages like, "Oh, Kaitlin, like I saw this croissant in Paris. It made me think of you. Like you would love this. You have to try this," because they know what I like because it's us.
Yeah. And also going back to your question about like what advice would we give someone starting? I think you have to. I mean, you can never know where you end up, but if you are strategically going into starting to blog about food, you should definitely give it some thought in terms of, am I mostly interested in covering my local food scene? In which case you should probably, you could pick a name that has something to do with the city you're living in or something like that. And I think that can give initially a boost to your work because it's very recognizable. If I had called myself Oslo Food back in the days when I lived in Oslo, then people would have known, okay, this account is about Oslo food in Oslo.
But then if you started traveling.
But then if I started traveling and posting from all over the world, and suddenly my name doesn't make as much sense, and now moving to Copenhagen, and for you as well, moving from LA to Copenhagen, it wouldn't have made sense if our handles were connected to our cities, and then we would have regretted that decision probably. But it definitely has some perks to have a name that is linked to something as well, like have food in your name or a city in your name.
There's pros and cons, but I think, like we've leaned on our names and our identities and our personalities instead of like the identity of a city. And of course we are in Copenhagen and we've been here like for the majority of the last year, and we'll probably be here quite a lot, but we also do hope to explore beyond the city. So.
But I think also for people following us, they know that even though we use our names, it's not really about us. I mean, in everything we do, we showcase the restaurants, we showcase the chefs. We talk with the chefs, we interview chefs in our YouTube videos. It's about showcasing the amazing places out there.
Yeah, we want to show from.
But with a personal touch, and it is also our opinions in many ways.
And I think, our YouTube channel is the videos are from like Anders' first person perspective. So you can see it's like as if you're sitting in his seat at the table and the waiter is bringing a dish to him. And okay, he pans up and I'm sitting across from him and I'm eating it because we do want to show like, okay, how was it? Is it good? Okay, wow, this dish was really good. We want to bring it to life. But it's, we want it to be like anyone could be dining there.
It gets, this is a little bit back to my point of like the people that say that you need to blow up World's 50 Best and start with something new. There's a sense of like, oh, well, you're just saying good things about your friends when you talk about places where you develop a connection with the chef or the team or the project in general. And I think it's like play the other end of that spectrum, right? The person who goes out to eat completely by themselves, they have no friends, they have completely anonymous personas when they go out to eat. It's like, who would want to do that as a career? Like it's just it's so funny to me that like that ends up being the thing that people are like, because the opposite of what we are talking about from the sense of like, when you go to a city, if you're in New York, you're going to go see your friends in New York. You're going to go eat at their restaurants. You're going to have experiences there, and you're going to share and put them on blast. And like, it's like the gas your friends up thing, like you want to show your homies the love, but then it like gets misconstrued as this thing where it's like, oh, well, you're using your platform to just put your friends on, but it's like, of course I am kind of thing. So it's like, do you guys grapple with that at all? Especially knowing that you're doing this under your own name. And then I have a quick follow-up question after that too.
I think for us, I don't know, so far at least, I think for us, like we become friends with people after we've gone to a restaurant a bunch of times. And if we've gone to a restaurant a bunch of times, that's because we love it. So then if we're posting about it, like if we go like, I don't know, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know
like,
what you mean.
It's like, well, why do we become friends with people? It's because we've become regulars at this restaurant because it's so good and we can't get enough of it and we can't stop posting about it. And now we're friends with the team there. And of course we're going to keep posting about it and recommending it.
And naturally, your experience going in is going to be different than someone who's never stepped foot in that place before, and it's, people just get it twisted, I think.
And I think that's also an argument for why you should never just take one person's opinion and go with only that. Like, no, you shouldn't just use our recommendations when you visit Copenhagen. You should probably check with a couple of other people too, because obviously we're going to be skewed in one direction. We have a particular taste, like this is what we prefer. And of course, when you're a regular at a restaurant, you enjoy it more because you're treated as a friend when you enter, right? So you might go there and not have as great of an experience because you're not friends with them yet, or you're not recognized when you enter. And everyone wants to like feel welcome. So I think, just doing research and checking multiple guides and checking with more than just one of your chef friends before you eat in a city is a good idea.
My follow-up question was going to be in relation to you two effectively working together, right? Like you guys, live together, you work together. I made the very, for me, strategic decision to not date in the industry. I cannot date someone who is a chef or a pastry chef or a som. How has that been? Like, how do you guys grapple with that? If someone is working with their partner, do you guys have any advice that's been helpful for you?
Well, yeah.
Only a problem when we're talking over each other in podcasts.
Yeah.
Well,
before we started talking, you guys referenced yourself as a singular unit, which is amazing. But at the same time, it's like I can only imagine that comes with conflicts at certain points in time. So.
No, absolutely. But I mean, the thing is, we both have been in relationships before we met that was not related to the industry. So we know, the challenges with that. And we know the pros and cons of being in the same industry and doing the work together as we do. And now we've even had to do the work together from our home the whole year,
Literally confined to the same tiny apartment nonstop every day. No, I think for us, it's just like we happened to meet each other when we had already been doing the exact same thing across the world. And we both were pretty committed to that lifestyle. And all of a sudden we had discovered, oh my gosh, there's this male version of me in Norway who's doing exactly what I'm doing. And he's as crazy about food as I am. And like, I think we both were the single diners a lot of even if we were in relationships, regardless, like I think we were the party of one at the restaurant, and that is not as fun. And it's just, also it's a lot more work, I think, doing this alone than doing it together. And now that we are a team, like it just made so much sense instantly. Like pretty much after we started dating, we combined forces because okay, now Anders can take the photos and I don't have to worry about the camera, which I'm not as comfortable with. And I can write notes at the restaurant and be remembering those details. And Anders can be filming and then I can do more of the writing. And we split the tasks in a way that like now we can get more done because there's two of us instead of one person each.
Yeah. I mean, overall, the pros really outweigh the cons by a lot. But we just need to be aware of our situation and make sure that we sometimes, take a break from food, because sometimes it becomes too much. Like we're even like watching food shows on our television when we're not working. Maybe we should just watch something else. Maybe we shouldn't necessarily
be reading Ruth Reichel in our free time.
Well, exactly what I am, though.
It's an obsession, but I also think I think the hardest part is that we're always working, never working. And that is like, it's a dream job, and it is. And it's so much fun. And I love what we do, and I couldn't do anything else. But also, we are always doing it. Like, we are always online. We don't have a holiday. Our holidays are our work, because even if we wanted to, like, even if we said, okay, we're not going to work this week, and we go to, what are we going to do? We're going to plan a trip around food. And then what are we going to do? We're going to document it. We're not going to just not document it. That would just be like kicking ourselves in the feet.
Our most like nights off are when we go back to a place we've been so many times that we couldn't care less if we took a photo of the food.
Yeah.
We might still take a photo of the food
with Instagram stories.
might still take a phone photo, but the point is we don't have to, you know.
Yeah,
it's
like,
more like
leave the camera at home and like go out without, you know, you can drink an extra bottle of wine because you don't have to be like focused, you know, you're just relaxed.
But the thing is, how this whole thing started for me was going on holidays and eating crap food and being sick and tired of it. So I would like start, like back then, like 15 years ago, I would maybe start doing the research while on the trip. Horrible idea, of course. And then what did you have back then? You had like TripAdvisor, and maybe that could at least guide you to where there was a restaurant, but you had no clue if it was a good restaurant. And maybe there was a photo or two online.
What were you both doing for work when you started? Because you both mentioned that you weren't doing this, you know, originally for dollars.
Yeah. My background is marketing, and I was working in sales and marketing, first for an IT company and later on for a newspaper. So I had a little bit of an idea of the whole media world, but food was definitely just a hobby. And at some point, I decided to make it my job. You were kind of fresh out of
I was
college.
a student. I was a student in New York, living in New York. I'm from LA, but was in New York when I started an Instagram. Just because as a poor student, I didn't have the budget to go out to eat, and I wanted to make it. If I made it a hobby or made it work for myself, like, oh, I'm gonna blog about this on Instagram, then I can go out and treat myself. And yeah, I studied psychology and English, so I wasn't expecting this to become my full-time job, but ever since I was little, I said I wished I could eat for a living. So it's pretty sweet that it's worked out.
But back to the the trip planning, because that becomes really hard now. We can't really go anywhere without planning the food, and that we talked about it the other day. Maybe we should have a holiday soon where we don't like care about where we go to eat. But then you're like, oh man, that's gonna be sad.
It's not what's the point. It's just that it's so beneficial to structure a trip where around those premises, because it's like you have to eat 3 times a day or 2 times a day, you know, depending on the person, right? And so it's just easier to, like, if you're going to Paris and you want to go see a certain site, like at a certain time of day, like where are you going to eat lunch around there? And to your point a little bit, Anders, you can just go to the first place on the corner, you know, and potentially have a really bad meal. Or you could just do like a touch more work. Like, it's really not that much time. It's maybe like 45 minutes of extra work to figure out, like, this is actually going to be a really memorable. And it's like, you hear stories of, so my dad just retired. And he tells me stories about his, unfortunately, his health is not great. And all he wanted to do when he retired was travel and eat. And when you hear people that are old, retired, talking about trip experiences, what's the first thing that they usually talk about? Is like something that they ate, usually. You know, it's like some sort of food experience. And so I don't, you know, I'm trying to, you know, give you some moral support there. Like, it's actually like you're planning your trips in the right way.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, if we're going somewhere and we are planning our meals, then why, like in our position or from our perspective, then why wouldn't we document it? Why wouldn't we turn that into something that could help others? And that's what's really hard. Like, we can't really just go somewhere and just relax, I guess.
And I think that's just what we have to keep in mind, and what I think we've tried to accept, especially in this last couple of years of merging our business into one, is just like, okay, so we are working most of the time, but like, let's make it enjoyable. Like, let's make our work so fun that it doesn't feel like work. And like that, I think we have such a lucky life, like, and to be able to go travel and go to these places. And, you know, yes, we have to do the work of documenting them and writing about them. And it's a lot more work than people think, but
I guess one of the best like holidays we've had recently was when your parents were here, because we spent 2 weeks just going to places we had been, because we just wanted to show them the best spots, right? So we didn't need to document anything. We didn't need to like make anything. We could just show them.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a holiday for them and us.
Amazing. You've interviewed a lot of chefs as part of these experience videos and blog posts on the site, which I have to say I think is amazing. Like, it's something that I hope to incorporate. You know, like I see a full suite kind of like content thing around a certain chef when it's okay to travel for me again, where it's like I do a long form conversation like this, and then I also go out to eat at that restaurant, and then I, get to talk to some of his line cooks because that's something that like I'm really passionate about, and then it's like this whole suite of content that I can put out about an experience and about a location and about a chef. But one thing that I think you get from those conversations, hopefully you get, is a sense of that chef's philosophy, and what I will sometimes call like what the chef has to say. And so as kind of a meta question, when you ask those questions to chefs, what are you looking for in those answers?
Yeah, I think especially if it's a new restaurant, or at least new to us, we want to uncover like the essence of what it's all about, because with our YouTube videos, it's not a full-length chef's table episode. It's pretty short. So we want to ask the right questions that get to the heart of what this chef is about, whether that's sustainability and all the ingredients coming from this mile radius around his restaurant. Like, what is it? Or is it nothing related to sustainability? Is it getting the best ingredients from all over the world and sourcing them from however far you have to get them? Like, whatever it is, it's different for each person. And I think it's like doing research ahead of time and knowing about them to be able to ask the right questions, which we write in advance so that we're prepared, and then also seeing where the conversation goes and just trying to connect. And
yeah, it's a good question, because as with everything we do, we kind of just we start doing it without thinking too much, and then we learn as we go. So with these chef interviews in the beginning, we weren't really super prepared, to be honest. Like we thought, well, we'll just wing it, we'll just talk with them and have a conversation, and we'll get something out of it, And then you start realizing, man, it's really hard to get people to talk about the core, the essence of what you want them to say, because we have an idea of what we want them to say so that we can use it in our video, but it's hard to get people to say it in like a short, concise, precise way.
But I'm trying to tease out in this answer for the chefs that are listening, like it's part of the reason why I think I find myself moving more in the direction of projects that I've been working on, because I don't think that I have anything unique to say with my food yet that isn't already out there or hasn't already been said. And so I'm working on these other projects until something will happen in my life where I say, this is what I have to say about this. And the only way to bring this to life and put this out into the world is with, insert thing, a food truck or a restaurant concept or a taste encounter or whatever. And I think chefs don't you do all the work of like meeting with architects and building out the space and hiring staff and creating dishes and doing all this stuff, but you don't actually know what it is that you have to say. Or like Anders, you're talking about that one line of like, this is why I'm doing this,
Yeah.
And so it's like, I'm trying to get chefs to be more comfortable with having those hard conversations with not just themselves, but like really just like distilling it down into this thing. Cause it makes it so much easier to talk to, content creators like you, like the media. It makes it easier to talk to your staff. It makes it easier to train people. It makes it easier to write menus when it's like you point the ship in the direction, that you're of what you're trying to do.
And I think, first of all, I think there's a good market for you out there to consult on that, because I think a lot of chefs could need that training. And it's so easy to spot when a chef has had that training. Like we interviewed Rasmus Kofod from Geranium for one of our videos, and we did not shoot anything twice. And at the end, yeah, exactly. I remember at the end of that interview, we said to him, "You're a natural. This was great. Thank you for your 8 minutes, which will probably be cut down to 6 minutes."
Amazing.
And if it's a new up and coming chef, they're maybe a little bit more nervous on camera, or like you can see that they have so much passion inside them, but they're having a hard time articulating it, what it is. And it's just, trying to make them you have to make them have confidence in themselves, and you'd be like, you're doing something amazing. Like, we really want to showcase your restaurant, and we believe in it, and we believe in you, and please believe in yourself, because you are doing something very cool and unique. And sometimes I think it just takes a little bit of getting comfortable with us. Usually interviews like that just take longer, because we just try to have a natural conversation with them first, and then once they relax a little bit, then they can be more open. And
That's a key point, because we always try to make our interviews more like conversations. We kind of set it up so that the chef is facing Kaitlin, who's asking the questions, and then I'm kind of on the side with the camera, which is a nice angle anyway for an interview. I hate the kind of like looking into the lens kind of style. So that makes it a little easier. And I think we've just learned to do like a 15-20 minute just chat before we really get into the questions and what we want them to say.
Yeah. It's also funny because one thing that made me laugh is that chefs, like, I don't know their dishes so well or something. Like sometimes we ask them to like highlight a couple signature dishes that we are maybe going to shoot in the kitchen or something like that, just to get the specific details. And I think, I don't know, maybe this is just one person, maybe this is not true for all chefs, but I feel like there's been times where maybe the front of house has been more trained on how to present the dish, and the chef just will say like, I'm like, oh, what's a signature dish on the menu right now? And they'll be like, scallops. I'm like, cool. Are they served with some Sarah sauce? Like, are they cooked? Are they raw? Like, you have to, and then they're like, oh, right, you don't know what I'm talking about, because they're so used to it. They know it so well.
Or they will go into way too many details about the cooking process, but not so much about what's on your plate, what you're going to see. So we're like, okay, but could you just summarize the
main element? You present it like you would present it to the table, scallop with this sauce and topped with this herb and whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, I can relate. I am not super comfortable on camera. I can kind of relate with a lot of them when they're nervous, and I have no problem with talking to you even though we're on camera now, because we're just having a conversation.
So that's how we try to make it feel for them,
and that makes all the difference.
I think it just takes practice.
For sure.
I have a whole video on the channel that talks it's called How to Talk About Food, because I think it's so crucially important. And one exercise that I gave to chefs that I think is valuable for myself when I'm writing menus is to, when you write a dish, you write it in 3 ways. So you write the dish on how it's going to be written on the paper menu, even if you don't have a paper menu. You write how you're going to talk about it with the chefs, because that's, Anders, to your point when you're talking about like something is sous vide and it's dressed with this oil and it's the acid in this dish is going to be whatever. And then you have what you're going to tell the guest at the table, which is usually like the short and sweet. Maybe you fluff it up with a little bit of language, talk about where the mushrooms are coming from, for example. And they're all different. Like, they're all different. They have different use applications, and you use different language and you approach them in different ways. Maybe even the way that you order the words is different. And then the other thing that I wanted to share, like a little bit of a chef anecdote, is that there's a certain sense when you get to a certain place of doing either the same menu structure or the same dish over and over again, is you fall into almost like this circus performer mindset, where it's like you see the same show every single night, so you don't think it's special. But like, to someone who's never been to that restaurant before, it's like totally mind-blowing, and they've never seen it before. But like, maybe it's like the magician's dilemma, because it's like, how the trick works, so it's not special to you. But to the audience member who's never seen it before, it's like, oh my God, this is incredible.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's got to be hard, it's you have to constantly remember you have an audience and you're a performer.
Exactly. I want to jump into some rapid fire questions. Let's do some rapid fire ones. Is there a book that's been particularly impactful for both of you in your respective careers?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind for me is not actually a book, but it is a food writer. So I'm going to go with my always reference, which is Jonathan Gold's LA Times food writer. And the documentary about his life, City of Gold, was just so impactful. Like, I could list a bunch of books I love reading, and I could list all of the food writing books that I love. But for me, City of Gold is even more of an impact. And then his reviews that are referenced in that documentary, his writing is just amazing. And I think he just showed readers that you don't have to, like, food is for everyone, and you don't have to be an elitist person. You don't have to be a rich person to love food. You can go into your strip mall and find an amazing meal. And I think it just brought it to life in a new way.
Kaitlin reads like 100 books or more a year. She's insane. She reads constantly. either a book in paper or on her
audiobook
or an
Kindle?
Kindle or an audiobook. There's always something playing. I take all of that and I usually spend that time either learning something new on YouTube or watching something on YouTube. I read way less than you, but I have been reading some classic books in the last year, like Anthony Bourdain and Kitchen Confidentials, and right now I'm reading Ruth Reichel, Garlic and Sapphires. Yeah.
I mean, it could effectively be a question. You could replace book with podcast or YouTube video or documentary. I just like to kind of get to the essence of things that have an impact on people and how they approach their work. Which other one? So I'd be curious because you guys post a ton. What's something that doesn't end up on your Instagram, as in you don't share it widely, but secretly you get really excited about it or you love it?
Golden retrievers. It's less secret now because I have posted a golden retriever lately, but if I'm not following food, like on my personal account, all I follow is golden retrievers. No food, just dogs.
That's so true. That is so true. And now as an effect, because she's sending me so much golden retriever videos, my suggested Explorer feed on Instagram is starting to fill up with dogs, and I'm like, well, what is this?
The algorithm.
Oh yeah.
Would you guys get one? Would you guys get a golden retriever?
We would love to get one. Unfortunately, I discovered
my parents have one in Los Angeles,
and I discovered the hard way that I am allergic to dogs. Right. I had never had a dog never had a dog at my home, and went there for the first time to visit our parents, and after a week just could not breathe. So
we will be getting a hypoallergenic dog in our future.
That's our plan.
Anything for you, Anders? Something that sticks out that you don't share it but you secretly enjoy it? Or you could. The other question that's interesting for you, because you know what it's like to build an account, is that if you had to build a pseudonymous account around something, what could you build it on?
Exactly. Well, the first thing that came to mind when you asked the question was that my love for milk does not come across as much on Instagram as it maybe should. Because I did
hear that that's your favorite ice cream.
Yes.
It's beyond ice cream, though. He drinks like a gallon a day. This is not an exaggeration. He has a problem.
Just straight up whole milk.
Yes. From a local farm.
Justin, when you come to Copenhagen next time, I'm going to introduce you, and you will be mind blown. The milk we've discovered here in Copenhagen.
You don't have one in the fridge to show?
No, I actually don't. We were out, which is a bit
gone.
of a crisis. Yeah, it's
They're
a bit of a crisis.
the glass bottles, from the farm, old school.
No, but I've always loved milk, and I thought, surely Norway has the best milk in the world. But I have discovered that actually that is here in Copenhagen. There's a small farm outside Copenhagen that makes the most insane milk I've ever tasted. It's just so creamy, so sweet, and so delicious.
Are you gonna start crying?
Maybe.
I mean, I grew up in the highest dairy producing state in the U.S., which is Wisconsin, and so we're more of we call ourselves a cheese state, so it's more of a cheese love for me than milk itself, but I can empathize. Oh, this is okay. So this might actually turn into another podcast by asking you guys this question. You somehow get a call right after this interview that you've just won an all expenses paid trip to eat at your dream restaurant. And when you get there, there's someone you've always wanted to talk with, waiting to have dinner with you. What is that restaurant and who is that person?
Well, we know where it is.
Yeah.
I think I know who you'd like to talk to there.
Well, and for you two, maybe to add a fun twist to it, it can be it's a 4-top, right? So it's it's a double date, or it's just it's a 4-top, doesn't have to be a double date, but you know what I mean.
I mean, our favorite restaurant in the world right now, and has been for the last 2 years, is Frantzen in Stockholm. Yep. Mm-hmm. And we're really craving to go back there right now because we haven't been in over a year and a half. Wasn't it your birthday my birthday last time in 2019?
Yeah. Mm.
I'm sure you'd like to dine with Jonathan Gold.
I would have loved to dine with Jonathan Gold. I feel like he was just such a wealth of food knowledge. It would have been
What do you
amazing.
think he would have thought of Frantzen's tasting menu?
Oh, I'm sure he would have loved it. I know he went to the new Noma right before he passed away. He went right after they opened, and I know at that time I think he called it the best restaurant in the world. So I know he had a great appreciation for Scandinavian cuisine.
I mean, I haven't read as much of his writing as Kaitlin has, but I've read a bit, and he just had such a respect for the food culture wherever he went,
and for the chefs. Like, he was a chef's critic, you know. He was always like, even when critiquing, he just you could tell he wanted them to succeed. Like, and if he was critiquing something, it was just like, it's because he was like almost like a disappointed parent. Like, you can do better than this. This is not your best. Why did you have this on the menu? This is not you. Like, it just, not that he would write it like that, but that's just the sense of care you felt from him. Yeah.
Who's your person, Anders? Dinner guest.
I don't know.
I was gonna say no, Stephen Colbert maybe.
I was thinking Obama.
I was thinking Obama too,
Yeah.
but that's like,
He seems like
he is a
guy.
foodie. Obama is a super
Huge.
foodie.
Yep.
So that's cool.
He seems like a guy I'd like to have a conversation with.
But I mean, the amount of the Daily Show you watch,
Oh, yeah.
I think you would
Also
like.
a big fan of Stephen Colbert.
Yeah.
What's one thing you've changed your mind on in recent memory?
Well, reading Ruth Reichel right now has made me realize the power of being, and going back to our conversation, the power of being anonymous in a restaurant. And at least it's made me realize, you know, how important it can be to explore a place from a point of view where the chefs don't know you.
I love when she does the side-by-side reviews of like one dressed in this disguise and one as, you know, as the New York Times critic, and you can see the differences.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And it makes us just be more aware of our work. Like, we are not booking anonymously when we go out to eat, but you know, you just have to be aware of the fact that when you're not, you can get treated differently, and try to sort of see it from that perspective.
Hmm.
Kaitlin, change your mind?
You know, maybe like something like COVID related would be like, I don't know, we were traveling at this super aggressive, fast pace, just like you, like on a plane every couple of weeks in 2019. And like, that is so fun, and I love traveling and I miss it so much right now. But I think like I previously I would go a little bit stir crazy, like between trips, like gotta get back on the road. And this year I think has taught me it's really good to slow down and to have spaces between trips and have home cooked meals and have time to anticipate your next trip and get excited for it. And I think that is something that we're missing from our lifestyle, and that hopefully, like, even once the world reopens, I think we will try to slow it down a bit with the pace, and just like, hello, we live in an amazing city. Like, we were gonna be gone out of Copenhagen for a lot of 2020, and then the world was like, nope, you're gonna stay right here. And I think you have to appreciate where you live as well.
That's so true.
Being on the go.
It makes you potentially less prone to the, I'll call it like the expectation trap. Like, when you're so like itching to travel, I feel like sometimes, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, I suppose, I will overinflate how excited I am for an experience. And I think I certainly find that if you overinflate those expectations, you're putting so much unnecessary pressure on the restaurant to meet them sometimes when you get there. And then it can often, like, sometimes the best experiences can be the unexpected ones, where you just weren't expecting to be blown away by this place. And in that, there's some wisdom, maybe.
I definitely feel that's true. And I think that's like, it's just so much about managing expectations and trying to lower expectations, even about hyped places or places that you've heard great things about, because Like, it's just, that hype is also not fair to restaurants, because they might be a great restaurant, but if they're seen as like up here, and then, yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about that today, actually. That there was this restaurant when we were in Mexico that was hyped to the, sky, and going, like, first of all, we were a little bit skeptical about the hype, but it kind of makes you expect things, even if you're skeptical about it.
It's hard to manage that.
Yeah, and then going there and having a good meal, but nothing anywhere near the, yeah, exactly. It wasn't life changing. It was just a good meal, like a kind of like a home cooked style kind of meal.
And you're almost like, this chef never wanted to be compared to this. This chef just wanted to make a simple meal, and that, like, he didn't deserve to be compared to these top restaurants.
Exactly.
Yeah.
An interesting point to your answer, Anders, was I think there's a lot of people who stumble into either writing about food or posting about food, but I can and we've seen it play out with certain individuals in the space. But this sense of, I'm gonna start a food media company anonymously, very strategically, with the goal to, once I hit a certain following, I'm gonna, because you get this weird hype around being like, who is it? I wonder who's going to do this stuff. So it's like, it's almost like pouring gasoline on building an audience, because you can do it potentially faster, because you have this thing that people like us don't have, which is like this mystique around you. And then you can get to this point where you have, you reach a certain level, or you go to a certain number of places, and then all of a sudden it's like you make an event out of releasing your identity. And then it's like, it's even more, of a big boost. And if you do that strategically, like, you could potentially, it's like a bit of a funny hack, but a lot of us didn't start off that way. So I don't know. I'm putting that idea out there for anybody who wants to jump on it.
Exactly, and once you haven't started that way, it's kind of hard to go back and
put that genie back in the box. Exactly.
Can't cover this beard in this.
Yeah, exactly.
Take a big wig.
How do you guys make your eggs in the morning?
Scrambled, soft scrambled.
Very slowly cooked, just nothing added, just eggs, a little bit of salt, and just slowly cooked until they're pillowy soft.
I normally ask this question to chefs in relation to kitchen technique, but the essence of the question is to try to tease out craft improvement. And so the question is there a technique that you're still intimidated by in the kitchen, but you guys can replace in the kitchen with writing or editing or building community, like something you're still intimidated by that you're working to get better at?
In the kitchen.
Or anything.
Video editing, like, I'm so scared to open a 360 or VR video timeline, because I just have no idea how to edit that. Like, I can do a straight up 1080p or 4K timeline, but when you're talking about all this, or animation, like, I have no idea how to animate things. I would love to learn how, but I'm still intimidated by, if someone came to me and said, I need you to animate this thing, I would have no idea what to do.
I think I'm kind of intimidated by most things I don't know, and that fear of not doing things well enough makes me push myself harder, because everything we do, we've kind of learned just by doing. Like, we're not trained. I have never taken any classes in photography or videography. I learn everything I know from either just doing it or watching some kind of YouTube instructional video until I know how to do it. So I'm like you, like I'm really scared that the next job we'll get will require some kind of technique that I don't have yet, or a skill I don't have yet, and that just makes me, work harder to sort of cover that gap. And on that topic, I just spent, like, I think you can confirm, about 16, 17 hours straight watching YouTube videos, most of them on 2x speed, to learn more about lighting. And I was going to give you a compliment for the lighting in your video right now. I can see that you've done your work. You have the nice green light in the background. Your face is perfectly lit. We can see the cover of your of your body and your hair.
It's a nice fade out, the blur.
Exactly.
It's literally a corner of our kitchen. I would move the camera, but I don't want to screw up my thing. But like my stove is like right there, and it's literally a corner. But like I can move this, and it's like a softbox kind of thing. It just works. I don't know. I stumbled into it, and I used to have it for ages where the camera was on a tripod next to me. And it caused a bunch of line issues, and the lighting was never right because I wasn't close enough to this source, so I had to put a light there. It's always a learning thing. Like, you learn so much.
And you don't want to break the illusion by moving the camera now, because now it's like you're in a really professional spot, right? And that's the thing. You can. There's many tricks to cover up stuff when you work with photography and videography.
Yeah.
Like you see these like behind the scenes of these Instagram shots where it's a pool filled with oranges, and they just have the model laying in the oranges and the camera on top, and it looks like a pool of oranges, but it's just a little kid's pool.
But I mean, what I can certainly speak to is that, like, once I figured out this setup, it made me so much more confident in producing stuff. And that's effectively what you're trying to get to, right? Like, you want to be able to not be stressing about the lighting, so you can focus on the food that's coming to you, or the conversation you're having with the chef that you're interviewing, right? Like, it's not, and it's like, you want to be proud of what you're creating, of course, but it's like these secondary benefits are just fascinating once you learn these skills.
Exactly. And I that reminds me of one of the first time I shot a video in a restaurant for YouTube. And, it's just for myself. I'm not working for anyone. I'm shooting this video for myself, but I want it to be good. And then in the middle of the meal, I touched some kind of setting, and I didn't know my camera well enough back then, so I couldn't immediately identify what it was. So I had screwed up some kind of setting, and everything looked horrible. I just remember that feeling, freaking out, because you're in the middle of the meal. You don't really have time to start watching some kind of YouTube video on how to fix it. But I sorted it out and managed to continue shooting.
Oh my gosh.
Technique for you, Kaitlin? Intimidation?
I don't know. I'm not doing the technical stuff so much. I think, if anything, like, not intimidated, but something that I find maybe the most challenging right now in our work is trying to find that balance, like, for in writing about food and restaurants, that balance between, like, recommending something and critiquing something, and, like, being honest with our followers at all times, but being, like, as fair as possible to the restaurant, and just, like, navigate. It's such a difficult place to navigate, because I know that our followers really appreciate our honest opinions, but at the same time, we don't want to be unnecessarily harsh. And that's just something that we constantly struggle with. Like, is this worth posting about? Like, is it helpful? Is it providing information to people to show them, like, is this place super hyped and we need to help manage their expectations about it, because then maybe they will have a better experience because they don't have expectations up here, or is it just a tiny little shop that nobody cares about anyway? And if you had a bad sandwich there, then okay, just move on. We're not going to post about it. And I think that's something that, because really we want to only recommend places, and most of the places that we do post about, we're recommending overall. But it's just like, again, just put it back to putting our names and faces out there. It can be hard because nobody likes to hear negative feedback or criticism, even if it's meant in a constructive way. So that's something that I find challenging. That's
definitely one thing we've learned, and that goes like out to your audience, which is mostly chefs and industry people. Like, chefs want critiques to be fair and, critique a place when it deserves to be critiqued, but nobody wants their place to be the one that is judged hard. And we can see how chefs are like, even if we write an overall positive review, their focus will be on the one negative thing that we pointed out. And
yeah, it's hard.
The question that your answer might have already been said, but the last rapid fire question I had was, what do you think chefs can be doing better to help the next generation? So maybe there's some, nugget of wisdom in that, being able to learn how to take feedback or look at feedback as something that it's not a personal attack. It's discussing your work in a hopefully constructive way. But the other way I was going to present that to you that might have, provided a different answer or might be easier to answer is, what do you think like content creators / food media can be doing better to help the next generation of food media? So you can take that whichever direction you'd like.
I think for all industries, like around the world, I think the best thing you can do is to share knowledge and to help each other. And instead of seeing everybody, whether you're chefs or whether you're food media people, like rather than seeing your colleagues as competitors and seeing them as potential allies to support you, like that can you can go so far if you have a team of people ready to, hype you up and support you and post about your restaurant or post about your new project. And like, again, there's room, I think, for everyone. Like everyone is doing unique things. You need more than one restaurant in the world. You need more than one opinion about food. You need lots of writers, and there is so much space for this. And I think people are starting to realize that, like at least in Copenhagen, it's a very supportive food community of people sharing food knowledge and tips and tricks. And yeah, I think that's just something that we can take even further.
Yeah, your first question about chefs made me think that there's a lot of pressure on chefs on saving the world these days, like with making sure that everything you do is sustainable and done in the right way. And we talked about it the other day when there was there's been this debate in the media here, mainly in Norway actually, but it's also a little bit to do with Denmark, because some chefs have been criticized for selling out because they've accepted work. Mind you, during this pandemic, they've accepted work for, big grocery chains or even worse, like fast food chains. And of course, their colleagues are calling them out. And, our first gut reaction was maybe also to think, why the heck is the chef working with this brand? But then you take a step back and you're like, my God, they also have to make a living, you know? It's hard enough to run a restaurant at the level that many of these chefs are doing.
It's not
and they're supposed to make every right decision and be like the spokesperson for organic produce and sustainability in every single way. And then you do everything right there, but then you make an error with how you treat your staff, which is also a super important issue. But it just makes me think there's a lot of pressure on chefs to do everything right.
I think like the temperature like of the world right now is so high. Like we're at the boiling point, and everyone, like pandemic maybe has caused this, or just there's so much stress in the air that everyone is just ready to attack anything. And I think we could all benefit from being a bit more forgiving of each other. And nobody is perfect, but if we're all trying our best, we can try to make this the most sustainable industry as possible and work towards like a greater goal together.
I'm trying to make it popular for chefs to come up with, Anders, I don't know if you know, but Lysverket started with 5 owners. So it was 2 chefs, 2 bartenders, and a musician were the 5 equal equity stake owners. And I'm not suggesting people do that, but I'm more talking through the Daniel Hume, Will Gadara partnership that started, where it's like you put the front of house person, maitre d', whatever you decide to call that person, in the same spotlight as the chef. Because what that does is that it gives that personal ownership to someone to take something off that plate of the chef, because we could be guilty of this as food media people, of putting the focus on the chef all the time. But it's like this sense of, oh, well, you want to hear about our philosophy? Talk to the chef. You want to hear about how the staff is treated? Talk to the chef. You want to hear about our sustainability? Whatever, talk to, I don't know. And so I'm a big, I'm a big proponent of just like chefs. I'm a big proponent of making it cool to take on other business partners, put them in the spotlight. So when I was doing pop-ups here in Seattle, I met a woman who had a degree in sustainable food systems. And I created a role for her with the pop-ups that I was doing called Market Emissary. Basically, you go and speak with purveyors on my behalf, on behalf of the pop-up thing that we're doing. And you do it. Because I knew, coming from like ordering for the restaurant, how much work it is to like talk to purveyors and figure out where you're going to source stuff from, and, you know, like manage inventory and all of that sorts of stuff. So it's like, I tried to preempt that, give her, and she would be at the dinners talking to people about the ingredients. So I tried to like not make that all on me, you know? And so I'm trying to make it okay, because it's something that it has so much grounding and tradition and footing and reputation. And it's like, at least from what I notice having conversations with chefs, it's like, oh, well, I worked for this chef who did do everything, you know, but then what comes with that? You know, maybe they had a horrible family life, or they got completely burnt out, or they had substance abuse problems, you know? So it's like you have all these negatives that come with feeling like you have to have everything on your shoulders. And so yeah. I'm in agreement with you guys.
Yeah. Spread it out.
Questions for me, topics, things that you wanted to cover here. I know that you guys sent a couple of questions through, but it's like, is there, you know, completely happy to, like, when my wife and I come to Copenhagen, I would love to have a meal with you guys and, you know, continue chatting. And it's always great to see you guys. But is there anything that we didn't cover that you were hoping to discuss?
I think we covered it well.
Do you want to talk about milk some more?
No. So the reason why I watched this video, or all these videos about lighting last week, is because I've now finally ordered myself some proper lighting equipment. As you can see, we're missing that. We're now, and it's getting darker here now. So I'm now maybe I should go and pull the curtains here a little bit, because we're almost in the dark now.
Yeah.
So we're working on getting better lighting. No, I don't think we have anything else to add. We'd love to have a meal with you and your wife when you come here.
Definitely.
Amazing.
And hopefully we can, you're in Seattle, right?
I'm in Seattle, yep.
Hopefully we can come there too. I have
your family there, right?
I have family in they're in Allen, Washington, yeah, so it's been a while, and I never really explored the food scene, so
yeah, it's still a bit of a I'm not going to say ghost town, because it's but there's a lot of restaurants who they've gotten the okay from local governments to open at, you know, reduced capacity, and they're just saying no, you know, because it's just like, I've been burned one too many times of like, you can open, okay, now you have to shut down again. And so there's this incredible trepidation of people that don't want to bring staff back on. And so it's hard. It's really hard.
That's been the situation in Norway as well. They've opened and closed so many times that now people are like, I'm not going to open. So in one way, it's been good, I think, that they just closed Copenhagen down for half a year, and places have jumped. There's been takeaway, but it's pretty much been shut down, and now it's hopefully reopening without too many limitations. We'll see.
Where can people find you guys online? Obviously, we want to put people in touch with the community that you guys are building, but, you know, if they have questions for you, where can they find you?
Well, you always find us on Instagram. I'm at Anders Husa. I'm
Carnivore, ORR at the end, like my name. And then our website is andershusa.com, and you can find a link to The Hungries, which is our food club there.
And then we have our YouTube channel, which is also just our names. So once you know our names, you will find us.
Anders Husa and Kaitlin Orr.
What's up? Justin here again. Because, I mean, if you're still listening, you didn't not like this episode, right? And if that's the case, I'd like to think that you'd get value from the other work that I share here online. It's all focused on helping chefs and hospitality professionals perform better. If you don't have a lot of time, the best place to start is with the email newsletter that I write every single week called the 80/20 Edge. That's where I share knowledge on sharpening your skills, asymmetric upside, and exploring the industry beyond the status quo. And I say it saves time because I include all of the content that I publish that week all in one place as kind of a weekly digest of sorts. Next up, you should check out my YouTube channel for gear reviews, clips from podcasts just like this one, and documented experiences from some of the best restaurants in the world. And lastly, if you'd like to learn about my intense cohort-based professional development-focused course, get coaching from me to help you make your next move, or just support the show, you can check out justinkhanna.com/support. And if you do support this show already, that's greatly appreciated. Thank you. Finally, it really does help to share a review of this show on Apple Podcasts to help the podcast universe know that people like us like shows like this. And until the next episode, my name is Justin Khanna, and I hope you have a good one.